The earned rich. This is where most people start and where many stop. The earned rich trade something directly for money, usually time, skill, or expertise. They're the top performers in structured systems. Surgeons, corporate executives, elite consultants, high-level freelancers. They're not lucky. They're not guessing. They've spent years becoming valuable at something specific, and the system pays them well for it. From the outside, this looks like the safest path to wealth, and in many ways, it is. There's predictability. There's stability. There's a clear ladder, but there's also a ceiling. Because no matter how high the income goes, it's still tied to output. More work, more money. Less work, less money. Even if they earn more in an hour than most people earn in a month, the structure doesn't change. It's still linear, and that creates a quiet pressure. They can't completely stop, not because they're struggling, but because the system they operate in doesn't reward stopping. So while this type looks powerful, it's also dependent. The moment performance drops, the flow slows down. And that's the limitation most people don't see. The leveraged rich. This is where the shift begins. At some point, certain people realize something uncomfortable. Working more doesn't scale. No matter how efficient you become, there are only so many hours in a day. So instead of trying to do more themselves, they start asking a different question. What can do the work for me? That's leverage. Leverage comes in different forms. People, employees, teams, systems of delegation, money, investments that generate returns, technology, code, platforms, automation, distribution, audience, reach, access. Instead of trading time directly, they build something that keeps producing even when they're not actively involved. A business that runs, a product that sells, a system that repeats. And this is where income stops being linear. Because when something works without constant input, growth compounds. The difference isn't small. It's exponential. One effort can produce results over and over again. And that's when wealth starts behaving differently. The owner rich, closely connected but not identical. The owner rich focus on one thing: control over assets. They don't just earn money. They own the thing that produces it. That could be equity in a company, real estate generating rent, shares in systems that continue to operate. Ownership creates a different relationship with money because now, income isn't tied to activity, it's tied to possession. If you own a piece of something valuable, you benefit from its growth whether you're actively working on it or not. And over time, that gap widens. Someone earning will need to keep earning. Someone owning can simply hold. And that's why ownership is one of the most powerful shifts in wealth. It turns effort into something permanent. The inherited rich. This is where the conversation usually becomes emotional. Because this type removes the story most people believe in. There's no grind narrative here. No starting from zero. They begin with access to wealth that already exists. Family businesses, trust structures, generational assets. And from the outside, it looks effortless. But the reality is more complicated. Because once wealth is handed to you, the challenge changes. It's no longer about building. It's about preserving. And that's not as simple as it sounds. History is filled with examples of inherited wealth disappearing within a generation. Not because the money wasn't enough, but because the mindset wasn't prepared. Some expand it, some lose it. But either way, they're not playing the same game as someone trying to build from nothing. They're managing something that already exists. The network rich. This type doesn't always show up clearly. There's no obvious source of wealth. No single business you can point to. But they have something more subtle. Access. They know the right people. And more importantly, the right people know them. Opportunities don't come through public channels. They come through conversations. Deals happen before they're announced. Ideas get funded before they're visible. Positions get filled before they're posted. This type doesn't rely on applications or cold starts. They move through relationships. And that creates an advantage most people underestimate. Because while skills can be learned and systems can be built, access takes time and trust. And sometimes, one introduction changes everything. The attention rich. This is one of the newest and most misunderstood types. They don't start with money. They start with attention, an audience, a following, people watching, listening, engaging. At first, it doesn't look like wealth. But attention is an asset. And in the current world, it's one of the fastest growing ones. Because attention can be redirected into products, into brands, into traffic, into influence. The people who understand this don't just create content. They build systems around that attention. And that's when it becomes powerful. Because now, instead of chasing customers, they already have them. But there's a risk here too. Attention is unstable. It can grow fast, but it can also disappear just as quickly. Which is why the ones who last don't just rely on attention. They convert it into something deeper: ownership, products, systems. Without that, it remains temporary. The quiet rich. This type is almost invisible. No signals, no performance, no display. They don't look rich, which is exactly why they're often overlooked. Their lifestyle doesn't scream wealth. Their behavior doesn't seek validation. But behind that simplicity is structure. Investments that compound, assets that produce, decisions made with patience. They don't need to prove anything. Because their position isn't built on perception. It's built on reality. And in many cases, they're more secure than people who appear far wealthier. Because nothing they have depends on being seen. The fake rich. This one is easy to recognize, but also easy to fall for. Everything looks expensive. The lifestyle is convincing. But it's not backed by actual wealth. It's backed by borrowing, debt, leasing, short-term spending. The goal isn't to build wealth. It's to look like it already exists. Because looking rich has its own rewards. Attention, status, social proof. And sometimes, that attention can be turned into real opportunities. But most of the time, it becomes a loop. Maintain the image. Keep up the appearance. Avoid the collapse. And the longer it continues, the harder it becomes to step out of it. Because once people believe you're rich, there's pressure to keep proving it. Even if it's not real. The temporarily rich. This type is often ignored, but it's one of the most important. Because it shows something most people don't want to accept. Getting rich is one skill. Staying rich is another. These are the people who had it and lost it. Sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. Bad decisions, overconfidence, lack of structure, or simply not understanding what created the wealth in the first place. It proves that wealth isn't permanent just because it exists once. It needs to be maintained, protected, understood. Otherwise, it disappears. The free rich. This is where everything changes. Because at this point, money stops being the focus. Not because it's irrelevant, but because it's no longer the problem. They have enough. And more importantly, they know it. Which removes something most people never escape: the constant need for more. They don't chase every opportunity. They don't optimize every decision for profit. They don't measure everything in money. They prioritize control, time, freedom, choice. And this is the part that often looks confusing from the outside. Because once someone reaches this stage, their behavior stops matching what people expect from rich. They might work less, spend less, or simply choose differently. Because the goal is no longer accumulation. It's autonomy. Most people don't fail because they can't become rich. They fail because they don't understand what they're aiming for. They see one version and assume it represents all of them. So they chase attention thinking it's wealth. They chase income thinking it's freedom. They chase appearance thinking it's success. But these are different systems. And each one leads somewhere different. If you don't recognize the difference, you end up climbing a ladder that doesn't take you where you thought it would. There isn't one way to be rich, but there are many ways to misunderstand it. Which type of rich person are you aiming to be like? Comment down, subscribe, and press the bell icon for more such videos.